Please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer and meditation. Please be seated. Thank you very much. Honorable members, welcome to the 249 for the mini plenary on the National Treasury. Welcome all our distinguished guests who are with us. Welcome also to members of the public who are with us today. We will start with our debate. Honorable Minister of Finance, are you ready to start?
Honorable Chairperson, the Honorable Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, ministers and deputy ministers who are present, honorable members. From the outset, let me convey the apologies of the Honorable Deputy Minister who is attending a meeting of the annual meeting of the African Development Bank in Islamabad, India. In tabling the budget vote 7 for National Treasury, I would like to begin by expressing sincere gratitude to the leadership and staff of the National Treasury for their continued commitment, pride, and professionalism in serving the nation. Particularly, let me extend a very special thank you to the former Director General Lungisa Fuzile for 20 years of committed public service, and on behalf of Deputy Minister Buthelezi and myself, for a professional handover as we assumed the finance portfolio. To the Chairperson and members of the Standing Committee on Finance, thank you for providing oversight and advice on the management of the nation's finances. The finance family institutions are critical components of our country's fiscal and governance framework. National Treasury has been one of the foremost institutions in role modeling the technocratic professionalism and ethical commitment of a capable and developmental state. We will continue this proud tradition at Treasury and throughout the finance family. Accordingly, we are committed to filling the vacancy of the Director General expeditiously. A number of excellent internal and external candidates have been considered. Interviews have been conducted, and a recommendation will be forwarded to Cabinet for its consideration in the coming weeks. We will also act quickly to fill other top management vacancies in the department. As the executive leadership of finance, we are absolutely clear about our priorities: inclusive growth and economic transformation as spelled out in the National Development Plan. Social justice cannot be fully attained if we maintain the current status quo. Therefore, economic transformation should prioritize, amongst other objectives, changing the structure, ownership, and institutions of our economy to include all South Africans in opportunity and wealth creation, particularly marginalized groups such as Black people, women, and youth. What then is our role as the National Treasury in this vision? The mandate of National Treasury is sustainable management of public finances, maintenance of macroeconomic and financial sector stability, and effective financial regulation of the economy. Our work is also underpinned by the 2030 vision as articulated in the National Development Plan. Our facilitation of the division of national revenue to serve the public in line with the Constitution and government policy at the necessary scale is compromised by low economic growth, which together with persistently high unemployment, poverty, and inequality makes demands on the fiscus to grow faster than the resources available to fund them. The budget progress becomes ever more fraught as departments try to fulfill growing mandates using static or even declining resources. As a consequence of low growth and rising demands on the fiscus, debt has grown substantially since the financial crisis of 2008. For us to be able to borrow and refinance debt, credit ratings agencies are critical as they rate public debt, and their independent assessment of our creditworthiness and economic prospects are influential with investors. The recent downgrades in our credit ratings by 2 ratings agencies have left our foreign currency denominated and domestic currency debt rating at sub-investment grade. We continue to engage intensively with all the ratings agencies to take them into our confidence on ongoing reform, growth initiatives, and our commitment to match at fiscal consolidation and improving the governance and sustainability of our state-owned companies. We hope these engagements will avert further downgrades in the short term and that progress in these areas will improve our credit ratings in the medium term. There is no magic bullet to improving our credit rating. We must implement the NDP and the 9-point plan. Progress in our economic development programs will result in improved credit ratings, business and investor confidence. As the National Treasury, we can only do our part to manage the fiscus prudently and sustainably, giving domestic and international investors confidence in our nation's macroeconomic stability, to facilitate a budget process which distributes resources to the programs which will have the most impact in carrying out government policy, to monitor the debt levels of state-owned companies closely to ensure they do not pose undue risks to themselves or the country, and strategically to use state procurement to ensure value for money and economic transformation through targeted procurement from designated groups. Ultimately, however, government as a whole, and especially the economic cluster, must work together to implement structural reforms required to unlock growth, speedily conclude outstanding policy processes, and stabilize and revitalize ailing state-owned companies. We all have to pull our weight and walk the talk. Chairperson, let me touch a bit on our current economic circumstances. Together with a gradually improving global growth outlook, stronger global commodity prices, and improvement in local weather conditions and household and business confidence, the 2017 budget review forecast growth at 1.3% in 2017, rising moderately to 2.2% by 2019 as global growth and domestic confidence steadily improve. We are not unique in our struggle for growth. Our engagements at the IMF World Bank Spring meetings, the World Economic Forum Africa and G20, highlighted the degree to which global leaders are uniting collectively to get the global economy on a faster and more inclusive growth trajectory. A further positive advancement this year is the operationalization of the Africa Regional Center of the BRICS New Development Bank in our country. We want to place special emphasis in these international forums on advancing development within the African continent in the areas of infrastructure financing, industrialization and beneficiation, regional integration and trade, and domestic resource mobilization and arresting illicit financial flows. Of course, we cannot expect international investors to invest in what we ourselves are not investing in. The DBSA is determined to contribute to closing Africa's infrastructure gap by increasing project preparation activities and catalyzing infrastructure investment at city and regional levels. The Land Bank is spending 3 billion rand this year on agricultural development and transformation. The Public Investment Corporation must continue to play a leading role in investing sustainably in the development of South Africa and the rest of Africa. As a shareholder in large companies, it can push companies to advance meaningful transformation as a matter of good corporate strategy. The PIC can also lead by example in empowering black asset managers by allocating more funds to them to manage. Chairperson, in implementing the 9-point plan, we have made progress on improving ease of doing business, energy availability, labor relations, and market competition. We have been and will continue to work closely with business, labor, and other social partners on practical initiatives building development coalitions to drive inclusive growth. Our engagement with various investors has highlighted significant discomfort with our low level of economic growth and slow pace of implementing necessary reforms. To be blunt, the two most important things we can do to restore confidence and reignite growth are to provide policy certainty and stabilize state-owned companies. We must take action to finalize the mining policy, broadband rollout, digital migration, and spectrum allocation. We must further act with urgency to address the fiscal risks posed by the state-owned companies. Chairperson, for South Africa to retain its sovereign independence, to make decisions in its national interest and in response first and foremost to the citizens of our country, we must avoid the trap of incurring levels of public debt we cannot afford to pay. The prospect of sustained low growth over the medium term remains the greatest risk to fiscal policy. Since 2009, spending has increasingly been funded by borrowing. Measured consolidation is needed to ensure fiscal sustainability, and we are committed to this path. We first set an expenditure ceiling in 2012 and have since then consistently hit our targets through a government-wide commitment to improving efficiency and prioritizing the most essential sectors and services. Spending plans over the medium term allow for moderate real expenditure growth, with priority given to advancing higher education, health, and social development. The government wage bill will stabilize as a share of the budget, largely as a result of measures to reduce appointments in non-critical posts. I am pleased to announce that the budget deficit for 2016-17 is marginally lower than the estimate presented to the House in February, which was 3.9% of GDP, and is now estimated at 3.8% of GDP. Over the next 3 years, the deficit will be reduced to 3.3%, stabilizing debt as a result as a percentage of GDP and confirming the resilience of our public finances. In the period ahead, government will focus on strengthening budget execution and the in-year monitoring of spending. The National Treasury is working with the Department of Public Service and Administration and all departments to strengthen our monitoring of personnel spends and help managers operate within budget constraints. We are working with other government stakeholders on a new infrastructure financing facility that will address shortcomings in the planning and execution of infrastructure projects and will ensure thorough technical analysis takes place. Chairperson, we are reforming state procurement to be strategic rather than a merely strategic function. We seek to use it to advance economic transformation by prioritizing targeted groups, improve efficiency by consolidating spend and reducing administrative burdens through modernization, and intensify the fight against corruption by minimizing opportunities for malfeasance. We plan to table a single public procurement bill addressing all the legislative and regulatory requirements of the system during 2017. The Office of the Chief Procurement Officer has already achieved 7 billion rand in saving as a result of renegotiation of the government's biggest contracts, renegotiating rates with airlines, hotels, and car rental companies, restructuring mobile and fixed line telecommunications, and smarter use of technology. We anticipate saving an additional 15 billion rand over the next 3 years through, among other measures, renegotiation of government leases, collaborating with the Department of Health in reducing the cost of medical equipment, health services, and medicine, and collaborating with the Department of Basic Education in reducing cost of stationery, school books, and furniture. The OCPO has also reviewed the PPPFA regulations to accommodate support for SMMEs, township and rural businesses, youth and women-owned businesses, and localization. The revised regulations took effect on the 1st April 2017 and will enhance opportunities for SMMEs to access government business. We will devote significant attention to eliminating barriers to doing business with the state, especially for small business, and ending the irresponsible and destructive practice of paying suppliers late. Chairperson, our constitution requires an equitable division of nationally collected revenue between national, provincial, and local government. The Division of Revenue Bill for 2017-18, which has been adopted by this House, provides funding to provinces and municipalities to deliver services such as education, health, housing, public transport, water and sanitation, and electricity. National and provincial treasuries have agreed to focus on 4 game changers in their efforts to improve the capacity and financial performance of municipalities. And these are: a new municipal standard chart of accounts will be implemented across all 257 municipalities from the 1st July this year. This is a major reform that will create line of sight from a municipality's IDP through their budget, financial reporting, and annual performance plan against predetermined service delivery targets. An improved supply chain management to reduce irregular expenditure and generate significant savings led by the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. An improved revenue management framework for municipalities that seeks to improve the internal controls, cash flow management, and operational efficiencies in municipalities and reduce unnecessary and wasteful expenditure. And improved asset management is essential for continuous delivery of services and to generate associated revenue. The budget guideline is that municipal capital budgets have a 60% allocation for new assets and 40% for the renewal and upgrading of existing infrastructure. In addition, municipalities are encouraged to spend at least 8% of the value of their assets on routine maintenance. We also need to make every effort to address the culture of non-payment by engaging all stakeholders. Government and citizens must pay for the municipal services they consume and uphold the prescripts of our legal framework. Chairperson, apartheid special planning designs cities that locate poor black residents far from opportunities, resulting in what has been dubbed the 40-40-40 syndrome, in terms of which poor black people live in 40 square kilometer houses, 40 kilometers from work, with transport consuming 40% of household incomes. This is intolerable. Transformation of these special development patterns is an urgent priority if we are going to improve the economic prospects of people living in townships and achieve inclusive growth. The National Treasury, through the Cities Support Program, is assisting the 8 metros to refocus their plans and budgets to invest in corridors that integrate former townships with the core economic areas of their cities, driving down transport costs, accelerating the provision of affordable housing, ensuring effective delivery of basic services, and effective management of land uses. Let us harness all our resources, including public and private investments, to give all our people a sense of ownership of their cities. Chairperson, economic growth for 2016 came in below expectations, leading to an under-collection in tax revenues of 30.7 billion rand for the 2016-17 financial year compared to what was forecast in the 2016 budget. Although tax revenues overall underperformed, there was an encouraging increase in corporate income taxes, showing that the economic activity may be starting to accelerate. Tax increases of 28 billion rand were announced for 2017-18 to consolidate the fiscal position, where the additional burden will fall mainly on those with the highest incomes. These tax changes will help improve the progressivity of our tax system to more effectively redistribute income in our society. Everyone, individuals as well as companies, needs to pay their fair share. We continue to be grateful to South Africans for funding their government through high tax compliance even in these challenging times. Reliable and efficient tax collection is a critical capability for a developing country, and SARS is an important asset in this regard. It is charged with collecting 1.2 trillion rand this financial year. We will continue to work with SARS to ensure it can fulfill its mandate to the nation and collect the revenue required to ensure South Africans fund their fiscus themselves, which is a vital test of national sovereignty. Further measures will be taken this year to combat base erosion and profit shifting through increased global cooperation and additional legislative changes. Tax legislation currently before or soon to come to Parliament will facilitate the implementation of the 2017 tax proposals, including the tax on sugary beverages. The draft carbon tax bill is also expected to be tabled before Parliament later this year. Chairperson, the financial sector plays a critical role in our country, but this must be enhanced to achieve the aspirations of all South Africans. The Joint Standing Committees on Finance and Trade and Industry have had a number of hearings on the transformation of the financial sector. Coming out of those hearings, the following stands out. We need to reinvigorate the financial services, the financial sector charter to ensure all South Africans participate fully in the ownership, management, supply, and take-up of financial services. Transforming the financial sector to serve South Africa better is key, including supporting SMEs and ensuring that financial institutions procure from SMEs and emerging businesses. Increased attention must be given to mutual-based organizations that provide financial services like stokvels, burial societies, and cooperatives to build these into credible competitors to the highly concentrated banking and insurance sectors. And good conduct practices and financial inclusion result in a financial sector that helps South Africans to save for university and retirement, buy a home, make and receive payments, and insure against theft and other losses. National Treasury will continue to support our parliamentary process in developing a comprehensive plan that sees our financial sector fully reflect South Africa's demographics. It is well established that a well-regulated and resilient financial system is a key foundation of any economy and reduces the likelihood of claims on taxpayer funds to bail out failing banks and other financial institutions during times of crisis. The long-awaited Financial Services Regulation Bill is expected to be passed by the National Council of Provinces today to ensure the implementation of a comprehensive system for better regulating the financial sector. The insurance bill, also currently before Parliament, builds on the Twin Peaks model of financial regulation envisaged in the Financial Sector Regulation Bill, particularly in respect of prudential supervision for insurers. The Financial Intelligence Center Act will strengthen our regulatory framework on combating financial crime. In the coming weeks, I will outline steps to implement the Act. Chairperson, state-owned companies need to be managed well in order to be engines or enablers of inclusive growth. In November 2016, Cabinet provided direction on various reforms, such as private sector participation, corporate governance, the shareholder management model, financial position, and institutional arrangements. As part of this reform process, work is in progress on a holistic resolution of the governance and financial issues affecting our state-owned airline. The work towards reviewing the appropriate group corporate structure for the state's aviation assets is complete. We are currently reviewing the options and recommendations and will soon announce a way forward. Chairperson, in conclusion, we must all do our part to advance our national development. Government, business, labor, and civil society must continue working together, guided by the NDP, the medium-term strategic framework, and the 9-point plan in pursuit of inclusive growth and economic transformation. Whatever our differences from time to time, let us not lose sight of the task at hand. We are not here for our own sake, but to represent the interests of all South Africans, especially the poorest of the poor, and make decisions that better their lives. Let us find areas of agreement and cooperation to drive practical initiatives which move our country forward. It is my privilege, Honorable Chairperson, to recommend the Budget Vote 7 before the Extended Public Committee, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Karim.
Chairperson, comrades and colleagues. My job is very simple. It's to largely deal with the report that we submitted on the National Treasury's budget vote. It's at the ATC last week, I think the 18th of May. I'll deal mainly with that, but obviously broader issues too. So I would like to firstly say that the committee welcomes the Minister's commitment to seek to avoid a further credit ratings downgrade and to reverse the existing downgrades. The committee notes that the annual budget and performance plans were presented under changed economic circumstances. When these plans and budgets were prepared, South Africa had not been downgraded by Fitch and Standard & Poor's. And while the Minister has provided an overview of his approach, there are some circumstances that are very new, and the committee requires Treasury to brief it on how exactly the Minister is going to address the downgrades at its quarterly meetings. Now, the committee welcomes the Minister's efforts to reach out to business, and we were pleased to see what you said today. But also, obviously, as you'll agree, Minister, we also have to have you and Treasury reach out to the trade unions. The committee believes that government, business, and labor need to work far more effectively together and requires National Treasury to brief us at least at its quarterly meetings. You spoke of a developmental coalition. I like that personally, and I expect the majority in our committee do. Now, the committee requires National Treasury to report quarterly to it on all its contingent liabilities, including the status of SOE guarantees, the extent of the exposure against guarantees, and the data on the portfolio of SOE assets. In its fiscal framework and revenue proposals report earlier this year, the majority in the committee welcomed government's commitment to radical economic transformation, which was defined in the 27th State of Nation address. I'll say this again, because I don't understand, Minister, what it is. There's actually a remarkably comprehensive definition. It's a radical national democratic. It borders on being a Marxist one, actually. But it's interesting. It says, and let me quote Floyd, what problem can you have with this, Floyd? It says, fundamental change in the structure, notice Floyd, systems, institutions, and patterns of ownership, management, and control of the economy in favor of all South Africans, especially the poor, the majority of whom are African and female. It's even more radical than anything the EFF would pretend to offer. The majority in the committee believe that National Treasury's formulation of the relationship, Minister, between growth and transformation is correct. You said to us earlier this year that we need to transform in order to grow, and we need to grow in order to transform. Without transformation, you said, growth will reinforce inequality, correct? And you said furthermore that without growth, transformation will be distorted by patronage. The committee will monitor National Treasury's programs in terms of this framework, Minister. Obviously, as you said last week, discussions on the RET, radical economic transformation, should continue. But what we need is more action more soon, in the interest of all classes and strata of our population, but primarily the disadvantaged and the poor. The committee has had major public hearings, as you noted, on the transformation of the financial sector and is processing its report. The financial sector, we heard, manages over 8 trillion in assets, which is about double the sector's GDP, the country's GDP. We also heard that it contributes 21.8% of the GDP and 15% of the corporate income tax and employs, moreover, about 260,000 people directly. Of course, we've yet to consider our report, but some of the issues that emerge, you yourself noted. There's no rocket science required, and I think you covered most of them, which impresses us because it means we're going to hold you to account. We're also going to say, the minister said, so your officials are going to be by the way, welcome, Dondo, and we wish you well as the acting DG. And may I take this opportunity also wishing you and the new Deputy Minister, who, as I said in the committee, sold us out. He never consulted the study group. When the President called him Anvasurti, he said, fine, I'll accept Deputy Minister. Did he consult with us? No. But that's a matter that the leader of government business needs to look into. Now, we also want to take this opportunity. Lungisa Fuzile is here somewhere. You know, Minister, you know, Chairperson, if I had my way, we would pass a law, Anvasurti lawyer, that somebody as young as Fuzile and as good as him, never mind that people have ideological and other differences. And by the way, can I claim, Chairperson, some credit? He did sociology at the old University of Natal when I was a lecturer there. So I must claim some credit wherever you are, Lungisa, that I have contributed to your growth as well. Can you give me a big round of applause before you clap? Now, give Mr. Lungisa Fuzile a big round of applause for his outstanding work, and let's wish him well. But let's also put to this House, Chairperson, you can rule me out of order, a resolution that he can go and do his cattle farming, but hey, we need him back in the public sector within 18 months. So can I pass that resolution, Chairperson? Can you look into that and come back to me? But can I go on to say that, Minister, one of the things that really troubled us is the laws that exist that allow the banks to repossess houses and cars. Many times, people are in the last laps of paying, and the banks have made huge profits. And yet they sell these homes, and then we are told, resell them by buying it cheaply and then selling it. By the standards of the most rapacious free market system, this is obscene, Minister. It's appalling. We know that this belongs to the justice portfolio, and we are pleading with you, Minister, to engage with the Minister of Justice. I shall also lobby him on behalf of the committee. This has to stop. This has to stop, Minister. This is just wrong, and it has to be stopped. So we are pleading with you. I will speak to Matole Mochecha as well, the chairperson of the Justice Committee shortly. This has to stop. Now, Minister, we want to also say that one of the key issues that arose, very interesting for people like me and maybe some others in the committee, was about the short-term insurance industry's approach to vehicle insurance and the monopoly of the whole value chain from assessors, towing yards and trucks, and motor body repairers, with some practices bordering, our researchers tell us, almost on criminality. We would like you and the Department of Trade and Industry and the Small Business Development Department to look into that. The committee, Minister, noted the polarized nature of the hearings we had. I've been in Parliament, like Tandi and others, Pokolo, since 1994. And frankly, I have never come across public hearings where in fact, there was such rage and anger. I think it might be true to say that the average person, their rage and frustration at the failures of the economy, at the lack of jobs, reflects itself on the financial sector. It reflects itself on the banks and the insurance industries. Because I think people go to the banks and they don't get what they want. So I think the banks need to be listening to that. We are calling for a structured, managed, negotiated transformation, but one that moves fast. And if they don't do it, as we keep saying, there's going to be a social explosion in this country. And we think it's in the interest of the banks, in the interest of the country, in the interest of the country's developmental goals and job creation tasks that this actually happens. So banks, please wake up. Otherwise, it's going to be too late. We are negotiating with you 5 years down the road. I don't think the masses there are going to negotiate. Look at the post-colonial transitions since 1947. Look at other revolutionary situations and learn the lessons, please. So we're saying, let's negotiate, but let's move fast, Minister. And we have decided that once our report is passed, once the recommendations are put, this will become the program of the committee. Every quarterly report we're going to monitor. Minister, we're pleading with you as well as a new minister. You're engaging with the banks and so on. Assist in setting the terms, the pace, and the nature and content of this transformation in all our interests, including the DA and others who are so alienated from any such suggestion. They speak more for the banks than the banks speak themselves. So often the banks are more progressive than, in fact, their representatives here, the DA. It's appalling that they're out of touch with their own constituency. I don't want to bore you with what a member of the DA did to try to prevent the banks from coming. And guess what? All four the CEOs of all the banks came here. They came here, notwithstanding the call from certain people in the DA, don't come, you're being set up. Actually, they keep engaging with us, and they keep lobbying us, because they know, Minister, Chairperson, where the power resides. It resides like in any democracy with the majority party. Right. Now, we also want to draw your attention, Minister, to the hearings we had, difficult and torturous. I see the chairperson there, the CEO there of the IRBA, the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors. Now, we are very clear as the majority. You can't have a situation, Minister, to have 4 auditing firms. I think it's between 90 and 96% of the market. Of course, they've deracialized the big 4. They have. Of course, they will. And very interestingly, it's African senior officials, very erudite, very articulate in English, who come here and say, we've transformed. So now you can't focus on race. It shows class emerging, Minister. Even in the National Democratic Revolution, we talk of class. So it's very interesting. It's African people, the insiders, often saying, No, we've transformed enough. The African auditors who are outside say, no, they haven't transformed. So here again, very polarized hearings. Now we are very clear. We must actually transform the auditing profession. But what we are not clear about, Minister, we've tried to work it out, we've sought some technical expertise. To what extent does the mandatory rotation of auditors contribute towards this task? Because it's entirely possible, some argue, and quite plausibly, that what would happen is this big four will consolidate their position, by rotating amongst themselves and so on. So it's a difficult area. We don't have precise views. The report will shortly come to us. But Minister, we're asking if you can consider, while understanding that the IRBI is independent, we are saying, is there some way you can negotiate with them that yes, they can go ahead with some of the things if they want, but let's try to get more buy-in. Let's have another 6 months or so before they implement it, because then it might well be, as they've been threatening, though we shouldn't be intimidated by this, that they'll go to the courts and so on. Now, there's no clock here, so one can never tell how many minutes, but that... Yeah. 4 seconds. How sad. I would like to raise Chairperson. Since 1998 or so, I've been raising this. Why can't we have a clock here? I've barely begun. But having said that, let me just say, we welcome SARS achieving its target. Minister, we've raised with you that on the sweetened sugary beverages tax, we need to strike some balance between the need for the tax.
Thank you very much.
And also employees and so on. We wish you well, Minister, and your new deployment.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karim. Honorable Menia.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair. Chair. Hello.
I haven't started speaking.
Hello. Chair. Chair. Thank you, Chair. May we request that we 4 minutes you give us, you notify us when we're left with 1 minute, please, if there's no clock here? Please.
Filtane, there's a team here in front of me. They are dealing with time. Let us proceed, Honorable Menia.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Point of order, Honorable Chairperson. My Honorable Chairperson, point of order. My apologies for...
No, in many plenaries, there shouldn't be 100 of point of orders.
The minister, they just said to me, Futsak,
Who is that one?
that minister there. That minister sitting there with the hands like this, Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable, Honorable Menier, they are really disturbing you. We are sorry for this. We didn't hear the minister saying that. Who's the minister? Honorable Shabangu.
Thank you, Chair. The honorable member, it's busy pointing a finger at me. I don't know why is he pointing a finger. Maybe he can justify why is he pointing a finger and doing this to me.
Honorable members, please, let us allow the debate to flow. Honorable Meni.
Chairperson, the Minister of Home Affairs, the Honourable Malusi Gigaba, was at a fashion show, rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous when the call came informing him that he had got the top job and would be our next finance minister. It was not long before the new minister and his sidekick, Maehlome Chwete, swooped down rather like Batman and Robin on National Treasury. The minister, to his credit, passed the first big test of any finance minister in our country. He lasted the weekend. Chairperson, this was the culmination of a shameful midnight cabinet reshuffle. President Jacob Zuma had recalled the former Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, from an international investor roadshow on the basis of a bizarre intelligence report claiming that he was part of a plot to mobilize people to overthrow the state. and then promptly fired him, can you believe it, to improve efficiency and effectiveness. The truth is that had the president been serious about improving efficiency and effectiveness, he would have fired the Honorable Batabile Dlamini and the Honorable Faith Matambi, who together could barely run a bath. The Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, condemned the cabinet reshuffle, saying it was unacceptable. Even the ANC Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, condemned the cabinet reshuffle, saying he was very uncomfortable. But the minister defended the cabinet reshuffle by condemning those who had condemned the cabinet reshuffle. He dismissed them, and I quote, as a bag of so-called ANC stalwarts and disillusioned ex-ANC leaders who were ill-disciplined. The fact is, President Jacob Zuma's midnight cabinet reshuffle had nothing to do with efficiency and effectiveness and everything to do with capturing the National Treasury for his #1 clients, the Guptas. And the president had the perfect man for the job in his new finance minister, the Honorable Malusi Gigaba, because in his own words, I don't ask questions, I simply comply with instructions. Speaker, things have been an absolute shambles since the minister took over, as he somersaulted between radical economic transformation and inclusive economic growth, and between attacking orthodox and right-wing economists at National Treasury and supporting the skilled and experienced team at National Treasury. Now, if the minister's objective is to deliver policy uncertainty, as he seemed to suggest a few minutes ago, well, he is succeeding. Speaker, however, things went from bad to worse when the minister appointed Professor Chris Malakane, who seems to have been trained at the Hugo Chavez School of Economics and who has some frankly mad ideas about the economy, including nationalizing the banks, nationalizing the mines, nationalizing the insurance companies, and he employed him as his economic advisor at Treasury. Now, Chairperson, of course, when you have a minister who in his own words simply complies with instructions and so evidently has no ideas of his own, who advises him is an important issue. Chairperson, things began to spin out of control. The minister told his economic advisor to keep quiet, but his economic advisor told the minister he would never shut up. The minister was forced into damage control mode, sending his economic advisor to the equivalent of a re-education camp to be rehabilitated. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The minister is Des Van Rooyen in a designer suit. But on reflection, Chairperson, I was wrong, because at least the Honorable Des Van Rooyen has a master's degree in finance, even if half the assignments were reportedly done for him by the Parliamentary Budget Office. But whatever the case, the minister has lost control, and the message is now 1 part Bloomberg, 1 part ANN7, and 1 part the Real Housewives of New York. Speaker, the National Treasury's legislative mandate in the 30.79 billion rand budget for 2017-18 are directed to ensuring transparency, accountability, sound fiscal control, and the management of our public finances. But the question is, how long can this last? Because like all politicians accumulating power, the minister has concealed his real political agenda, which he revealed in an unguarded moment during his maiden press conference, and which includes a strong commitment to implementing radical economic transformation and an attack on the National Treasury, which he believes is dominated by big business, by international investors, and orthodox economists. The fact is, and let us not be naive about this, the minister has been appointed to defang National Treasury, and he will do it with charm and cunning, and he will do it patiently and slowly. by exerting political control and reducing the institutional independence of National Treasury, by diluting the legislative mandate to reduce the institutional strength of National Treasury, by controlling the procurement process, by controlling the Public Investment Corporation, and most importantly, by approving and smoothing the nuclear build program. If you look carefully, the work has already begun below the line, with the Minister in the Presidency power-grabbing the budget prioritization process from National Treasury, and the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services power-grabbing control of the Financial Intelligence Center from National Treasury. The truth is, National Treasury is in danger of being defanged and reduced to bookkeepers under the new minister and his boss, President Jacob Zuma. We cannot afford to surrender to the mafia state, and so we are going to have to fight to maintain the institutional strength and institutional integrity of National Treasury. What this means is that the Finance Committee is going to have to require a reset from legislative mode to oversight mode and carefully scrutinize procurement, public investment, contingent liabilities, and the big fiscal risks. The fact is, though, Chairperson, in the end, President Jacob Zuma must have known that the midnight cabinet reshuffle would push the economy off the cliff. We are now in deep trouble with the midnight cabinet reshuffle and radical economic transformation, delivering policy uncertainty, stagnant economic growth, declining per capita incomes, a collapse in investment, a spike in disinvestment, massive unemployment, staggering national debt, zombie state-owned enterprises, junk status, and ultimately a loss of hope for the millions of people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs, and who live without dignity, without independence, and without freedom in South Africa. That is why it is not an exaggeration to say that President Jacob Zuma's midnight cabinet reshuffle and his policy of radical economic transformation amounts to the premeditated murder of the economy in South Africa. So if you do not have a job or you have given up looking for a job, you need to know this. You do not have a job because the ANC government has systematically mismanaged this economy, and you will never have a job as long as the ANC government is in power in South Africa. That is why you will be faced with a choice between a strong know-how economy which creates jobs for all, led by the DA, or a weak know-who economy which creates jobs for the few in election 2019. And we say, bring it on.
Thank you, Honorable Menier. The Honorable Shibambo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. You know, 100 years ago, Vladimir Ulyanov Lenin published one of the most important publications about anything in the world, and he wrote about a state and revolution. And part of his observations there, he said that a democratic republic is the best possible political shell of capitalism. And therefore, once capital has gained possession of this very best shell, it establishes its power so securely, so firmly, that no change of persons, institutions, or parties in the bourgeois democratic republic can shake it. So that is what Lenin has said. And I think that we should make an observation, a correct one, that the change of political office bearers in National Treasury has not changed its neoliberal and bourgeois orientation and character. And that is evidenced by everything else that was said here, the reaffirmation and recommitment to the new liberal national development plan. And the only difference that maybe exists is that those that have been recently appointed have got a mandate to continue the kleptocratic movement, which has been correctly characterized by the South African Council of Churches as a mafia state that is stealing from our state-owned companies in Eskom and Transnet and Dinel. That is the only mandate that could have possibly changed in terms of what should be happening. Now, whilst the factions of the ruling party are busy competing in terms of who defines radical economic transformation, let us just give you some of the key highlights of the state of the financial sector in South Africa. I know that there's deliberations that are going to go into a conclusion. But in South Africa, the 6 largest banks constitute more than 90% of the total market share, with assets of more than 4.8 trillion rands. And outside of the institutional investors, which is the PIC and many others, black people's ownership of those banks admittedly is less than 5%. They said it when they came to make the presentations in the bank. So the Association for Savings and Investment South Africa, called ASISA, says that the assets under management in South Africa is nearly 9 trillion rands, 8.9 trillion rands. And black-owned asset managers control or manage about 400 billion of that, which is like 5% of general assets under management. Meaning that the remaining 95% of assets under management are managed by white-owned companies, the Old Mutuals, the Sanlams, Coronations, and so on and so forth. Of course, that excludes the state-owned asset management company called the PIC. All the black-owned insurance companies came to illustrate that overall, combined, all of them are in less than 1% control of the short-term insurance. So in the industry, like black people are only at 1%. And attempts to change the face of the financial sector, there's been a lot of stories said about the auditing sector. That is 4 big multinational companies that are in control as well in that space. And attempts to change the face of the economy in South Africa have dismally failed because the legislation that exists doesn't have any teeth, doesn't have any enforceability in terms of what should happen. That is why we stand as the EFF to say that we need to legislate transformative commitments that can be enforced into law, as law in all the sectors of the economy. And part of the things that must be legislated should be that a minimum of 50% of all the financial institutions, inclusive of banks, insurance companies, asset managers, and the assets under management, should be in black people's hand. A combination of state, worker control, and individuals. I think that is one of the things that we must look into. In the immediate, Minister Van Rooyen, or they say the Minister Gigaba, there is an insurance bill which is before the portfolio, the Standing Committee on Finance. If you are really committed to this radical economic transformation, let us give life to the insurance bill, and in section 22 and all the sections that speak about the licensing conditions, we put transformative commitments that have to be brought into the financial sector, and then we'll deal with the control issues. There must begin to be legislation as well in terms of the minimum number of females that can participate or that should participate in all these financial institutions management, because currently it's a boys' choir that is running a capitalist white economy that must be dismantled by a decisive political action. Unless you do not do that and define that agenda clearly, the EFF will not agree with the budget of the National Treasury. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Shengwa.
Yeah, we are cool. Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Minister of Finance and other ministers present, deputy ministers and honorable members. I want to say at the outset, Honorable Minister, the saying goes, play the ball and not the man. But there comes a time when the man does become the ball. I would want to believe, prove us prove your critics wrong by doing the right things for no other reason other than for it being the right thing. Because you did not appoint yourself. So it would be all good and well for us to bash you here. The man who must deal with is not here. But we all know the reasons around why there was a cabinet reshuffle. And knowing them places you at the center of the controversy. So the advice from the IFP is rise above all that suspicion. Prove us wrong. It's all we ask, prove us wrong. Radical economic transformation at best is a catchphrase and a populist buzzword at worst. And therefore, to speak of radical economic transformation on one hand and inclusive growth on the other is in effect to speak from both sides of your mouth, and a great confusion which does not bode well for economic policy certainty. The credit ratings downgrade which befell South Africa in recent months are a result not captured. The ever-present hand of the Guptas, always capturing individuals and capturing entities of the state. And the National Treasury remains firmly in sight, in the firm sight of the Guptas. So you need to fend them off. Because bafuna uthatha yonke into nje South Africa bayaqoqa nje baphethe umshanelo bayashanela bayaqoqa. Manje ke baphuce lo mshanelo ngoba uma beqhubeka nawo abantu bakithi abazolimala. The appetite of the Guptas to take over SAA in itself is very worrisome, and we need further certainty from you, Minister, that SAA, albeit its shortcomings, remain safely in the hands of the state. The implementation of FICA must be speedily done, and therefore the soon-to-be-announced guidelines should remain on our radar and for us to scrutinize them carefully to ensure that we strengthen the fight against corruption and the stealing of people's money by certain members. Honorable House Chairperson, I want to say fostering an effective and efficient relationship with stakeholders by the department is very important and must therefore be a key priority of what we do. Minister, who you surround yourself with, it will be a clear indication of your own intentions. And this advisor that you have needs to go. Sluggish and stagnant economic growth, high unemployment, poor infrastructure maintenance, the failure to beneficiate around our economic strengths, and the ballooning social grant spending are a clear indication that all is not well in the state of South Africa. We therefore want to wish the department well in its endeavors of restoring all that needs to be restored, and avoiding a credit ratings downgrade is a national priority. It's in the national interest that we do so. You have our support for so long as you do the right thing and ensure that National Treasury is not captured. Uqale ngokuxosha amaGupta. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
The next speaker is the Honorable Shaikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Thank you very much. You know, that's exactly what I think my point and argument always. Rather than coming here and working together in the interest of all South Africans and finding a solution, if you heard the DA, 95% of their speech today was criticizing the ANC and picking on the wrongs and this and that and that. Rather than working and finding common ground, finding solutions so we can create a better environment. Yet, I want to tell you, now this is hypocrisy again for me. And let me tell you why. If you take the Western Cape and take Cape Town and the issue of the water itself, repeatedly the DA has been criticizing everybody else and the ANC for not being able to provide the water. They can't provide the water in Cape Town. Whose fault is that? They did not do the right thing. Now we talk about corruption. We talk about corruption, Minister. Take the Knysna municipality again. The municipal manager was incompetent, did not have the qualification. The DA appointed him. Exactly the same thing is happening there right now. So the problems exist throughout the country. I think what we need is to come together and forget about your political affiliation and find solutions in the interest of the people. And that is what the DA is not willing to do. Honorable Chairperson, the National Treasury is one of those departments that perform exceptionally well and must be congratulated for their efforts. Honorable Chairperson and Minister, congratulations on your appointment. I think what is very important that now that you are the minister, I think what we need is to work together with you so that we drive the country forward. I've heard from many of us, and you're going to continue hearing us saying, we know this is a challenge, we know there's corruption, we know this and that. But only together are we able to do something. We hear repeatedly about the Guptas. Why is it we don't hear about the Ruperts? Why don't we hear of the Rothschild? Why don't we hear of all these other? There's a few people, 3 billionaires. Only 3 billionaires in South Africa own equivalent of 50% of the wealth of the country, and they're all whites. So why don't we hear about that as well? Why are we only picking on certain things that suit us and not on the other things? Anyway, that is the issue. Honorable Chairperson and Minister, one of the issues in terms of your central procurement system, we find that 139 of these municipalities have not bought into this thing at this moment. It's quite a serious concern to us. The other issues, you talk about radical economic transfer, and I think it's a brilliant thing, because we need to address the inequality that we've inherited from the white apartheid regime previously. We need to address that.
You left with 1 minute.
In addressing that, let us not forget the issues of the housing challenges, the socio-economic conditions under which our people are living, the fact that we've already identified that only a very small percent of black, take the Western Cape, under 3% of women who make up more than 50% own senior management positions in the Western Cape. How do we address that if we don't take into consideration all these factors that contribute to the inequality in South Africa? But the other thing, Honorable Chairperson and Minister, our concern is that at municipal level, in 2015-2016, there's been 13 billion of irregular expenditure and over 17 billion of irregular and unauthorized expenditure. That is actually another very serious concern. We also want to ask Treasury to assist Parliament, because what has come to our knowledge now, that employees of Parliament are not going to be getting a raise, and we need to motivate our staff. We're calling on Treasury to make more funds available so that Parliament can provide a better and motivate our staff so that they can perform better. The National Freedom Party supports the budget vote tabled yesterday.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the Honorable Filtane.
Honorable Chair, the UDM does support the budget vote, provided the following are attended to. There's much to be done to transform the financial sector in South Africa, Minister. The slow progress of the empowerment front, in the financial services sector, as well as this refusal to transform, keep the majority of the black population locked into deep poverty and unemployment, resulting in the lack of economic progress. The local financial services sector falls far behind the transformation progress, which, as of November 2016, just stood at 4% of local investments managed by black firms and just 1.4% of JSC commissions received by black JSC broker firms. We repeat our firm view that the bank charges and interests make the banking facilities and system a private monopoly of the few and privileged. It is also discouraging those who have got little to save. It encourages the emergence of black markets, which rob our economy of growth, which is so dearly needed at this point in time. Through properly designed interventions, government should make sure that the banking sector is user-friendly, safer, and best option for keeping and circulating money in the interest of growing an inclusive and distributive economy. Chairperson, while in some instances we can understand the existing government guarantees of the state debts reach significantly high levels, it will be expected that concerns about the possibility of some guarantees being called will be raised by the financial markets. Calls on the guarantees would lead to an increase in government expenditure, and the question would be then, would government be able to take care of the funding for this increase in the public expenditure? It is therefore imperative that government do more to ensure that the financial performance of the SOEs is consistent with the developmental and social mandate dictated to by the National Development Plan as a response to the critical challenges facing our society. The UDM would wish ministry success in the recruitment of appropriate skills and expertise to those gaps left by the senior managers who left the department. The need for a developmental treasury cannot be overemphasized, Minister. The need for a focused and corrupt-free treasury is surely needed by our country. We need a zero tolerance on under-expenditure. Government must stop celebrating saving when poverty is our daily reality. This relates to under-expenditure. The need for a treasury that will be particularly sensitive to the needs of the agricultural sector is strengthened by the fact that that will greatly reduce poverty levels in our country.
Complete in 1 minute.
The 50 billion mentioned earlier is most welcome. We need a treasury that will insist on reports on the socio-economic objectives as a return on investment. At this point in time, government are not bothered to report on the socio-economic impact of their expenditure. Pay particular attention to sport as an alternative to job creation. So many people cannot make it in the academic world, but sport has got a very lean budget of only 1 billion rands. That needs to be looked into. It's an opportunity to create jobs. Lastly, we wish those officials that have left the department the best in their new endeavors. In the same vein, we welcome and wish the minister and his deputy great success for the sake of the poor South Africans, not just for our sake. And that is where we end our story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the Honorable Carter.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Treasury is at the heart of our economic development and the promotion of our national fiscal policy framework. At the dawn of our democracy, the Reconstruction and Development Programme, a vision for the fundamental transformation of South Africa, was adopted. At the heart of the RDP was an acknowledgement of an interdependence between the objectives of reconstruction and development on the one hand and economic growth on the other. That transformation, the rebuilding and restructuring of South Africa socially and economically, was only possible if the economy was firmly placed on the path of high and sustainable growth. And as Frans Kroon here of the IRR points out, for the first 15 years of democracy, during the Mandela and Mbeki eras, our economy did perform well. These golden years were characterized by rising levels of growth and conservative fiscal management. However, when the traditionalist and the left-wing components of the ANC alliance combined to overthrow Mbeki and subjected South Africa to the devastation of a Zuma tsunami, the ANC changed our economic policy trajectory with devastating consequences. We have been subjected to the converse of Mandela and Mbeki eras, the abandoning of rational economic sense and allowing growth levels to plummet as debt levels increased. And now, South Africans are subjected to a barrage of dishonest and racially inflammatory noise regarding radical economic transformation, which they can't explain, merely as the ANC SG lamented, to hide the failings and to save face. And then our illegitimate president irrationally pushed the junk button for what can only be rationally explained as being for the furtherance of a state capture project. We do need red. We need a brave and fundamental shift in economic policy to ensure meaningful and sustainable economic growth, the means to drive a transformation process, and the creation of a better life for all. COPE has no trust in the desire or the ability of the ANC to take the brave and non-populist decisions required to create the conditions for substantial inclusive growth around which we all can mobilize. And like a tsunami, the real damage caused by Mr. Zuma and the ANC will only be evident when the tsunami recedes. Now, the axing of Gordon and Jonas and the reappointment of you, Minister Gigaba, in the darkness of the night can only be seen as an attack on Treasury's institutional integrity, given the commitment to clean and good governance and the defense of government's procurement challenges. Now, Minister, if we connect a few dots like I've been doing over the last week, we will know that in court papers you are accused of being influenced by the Guptas over the Fireblades Luxury International Airport Terminal in Johannesburg. The SOEs, with their big procurement budgets, are central in the battle over state capture. That you took over from the corruption fighter Barbara Hogan as Minister of Public Enterprises, and you replaced the Eskom and Denel boards, and made several executive appointments at the key parastatals, including the likes of a Gupta-aligned Colin Machila to Eskom, Iqbal Sharma to Transnet, and Zupta agent at large Molefe as the chief executive of Transnet. That subsequently Rajesh Gupta and Duduzani gets taken VR laser linked to the 50 billion locomotive tender, that the state of capture report implicates Transnet during your tenure as minister.
Complete in 1 minute.
One can't help but question your integrity and rectitude for the position, and as the SACC posited, whether you are but another player in the state capture project, this time in the capture of our national treasury. Thank you.
The next speaker is the Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Minister, we consider this budget against the background of the dramatic events that many have referred to, and that was the cabinet reshuffle at the end of March, resulting in the firing of the former Minister Gordon and his Deputy Minister, and the appointment of the Honourable Minister Gigaba and his Deputy. This at a time when we saw promising green shoots of economic recovery, a strengthening currency, good cooperation between government, business and labour. And immediately after the reshuffle, we saw the weak currency, decrease in business confidence and economic growth prospects, and more concerningly, a sovereign downgrade by 2 credit ratings agencies, with Moody's still to consider its position. This will clearly increase state borrowing costs significantly, resulting in added pressure on National Treasury. Now, we from the ACDP wish to wish you well, Honourable Minister, and you've made the right public statements about sticking to the budget and fiscal consolidation paths. We trust you and your team will also allay those concerns raised by Moody's and avoid a further sovereign downgrade. You've also done well in putting the brakes on the Gupta-linked VR Laser Asia matter, but it seems this company is continuing its litigation and against National Treasury, and this, we believe, is disgraceful. You said, Honourable Minister, that you must address the risks posed by the SOEs, and we agree. But there's been a dramatic shift, Honourable Minister, following the state capture reports. There's a shift in society, and we all see that, and we as parliamentarians are picking that up. The protests, the public outrage that is increasing, and now, more significantly, the church is speaking out as well. And this is very important for us to bear in mind. We believers that are here and the broader supporters, parliamentarians, need to understand that when the church starts taking a significant stance, we need to do what is right and good. We saw open letters sent by church leaders representing millions of citizens to MPs. Last week we saw the SACC unburdening panel preliminary report giving a scathing account of evidence of illicit capital flows, state capture, and of course the nuclear deal. New revelations of state capture, provincial level, municipal level, were also referred to. The Secretary General, Bishop Mpowana, referred to radical economic looting and concluded by saying the present government has lost its moral legitimacy. That is serious. That is a concern to me as well as a parliamentarian. What steps, Honourable Minister, can you take to allay these concerns? It is growing, and there are steps that you can take, and that is to do the right thing.
Within 1 minute.
This morning, I was encouraged by the Public Prizes Portfolio Committee, and we will debate that tomorrow. but it was parliamentarians exercising effective oversight. We did that on the SABC inquiry as well. Every step that the executive takes needs parliamentarians to exercise oversight correctly. As Minister Brown said, the state capture report is a ticket to nirvana for opposition. It is not that. It is a wake-up call to all of us as parliamentarians to do what is right. Honourable Minister, what will you do to ensure that the state capture is stopped? In the Justice Committee, I've raised the issue of SIU investigations, of the NPA investigations. Those investigations can continue right now at this moment. There's nothing to stop that. We must withstand attempts at state capture with everything we do. And we from the ACDP call on all members of staff of the National Treasury to be cognizant and to be gatekeepers and protectors of national assets. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Honorable Mahlangu.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, on of programs. What we need to debate is whether the budget vote reflects the political policy orientation of the ANC, finances priorities within the mandate of the National Treasury, whether the budget vote reflects the implementation of the mandate of the department, addresses issues of equity, enhances principles of economic growth and redistribution, and whether the budget vote addresses unemployment and poverty, not what we have just seen here, but by Jukucha. Globally, Honorable Chairperson, since 2008, we have been experiencing very slow economic growth with a number of our trading partners in recession. Whilst there are indicators of a more sustainable recovery taking place in the number of countries, growth remains slow. Consensus projections are that the world economy will grow by 3.4% in 2017. The critical challenge for our country is that as global growth picks up, we must ensure that its benefits accrue and there is greater distribution of wealth, both in our society and globally. Honorable Chairperson and members, the ANC is committed to managing the South African economy in such a way as to promote employment, creating inclusive growth. This is fundamentally necessary if South Africa is effectively to overcome the structural inequalities inherited from South Africa's colonial and apartheid past. South African society is underpinned by racial capitalism, and without effective structural interventions, the system will continue to reproduce racialized poverty and inequality. Honorable Chairperson, taxation must be seen as a mechanism to cover the cost of governance and the provision of public goods. However, in addition, it is a critical mechanism for the redistribution of wealth. The redistributive function is particularly important for the achievement of social and economic transformation. Our taxation system is defined as a progressive taxation system in that it places the largest demand on those who are able to pay whilst minimizing the cost for the poor. Honorable Chairperson and members, South Africans watching, the appropriateness of the introduction of additional forms of wealth taxation is a long-standing matter that organizations representing the poor and working class have consistently articulated, as well as the feasibility of doing so. The distribution of wealth in South Africa is highly unequal, with recent empirical evidence suggesting that the Gini coefficient for wealth is about 0.9%. It is well established that economic inequality inhibits economic growth and undermines social, economic, and political stability. Honorable Chairperson, Allow me to speak on the illicit financial flows and BEPS. We are well aware of the staggering high amounts of money that are leaving this country illegally, and believe that not just Treasury and SARS, but government as a whole must do far more combat of illicit financial flows and BEPS. The committee finds the low level of prosecution for illicit financial flows utterly unacceptable. It is also unacceptable that, though Chairperson, the Panama Papers implicates about 1,700 South Africans, and whilst many may have acted within the law, there is not a single prosecution. The committee urged the Treasury, the Financial Intelligence Center, and SARS to ensure that they strengthen their human resource and technical capacity to manage the intelligence financial flows and BEPS. This institution should develop a coordinated strategy to deal with key aspect of illicit financial flows and BEPS. We also, as the committee chairperson, recommend that there should be an interministerial committee that should be effectively tackling the issue of illicit financial flows and BEPS. The committee also requires SARS to provide it with a comprehensive report on what staff it has to address these challenges, their level of experience and expertise, and their strategic plans, programs, and targets on tackling the illicit financial flows and BEPS. Honorable Chairperson, there is an issue that is on the table, the issue of sweetened sugary beverages. The Chairperson, when he was presenting the report, he spoke a bit about it. And allow me to speak to the public, because hona le taba e leng hore batho ga ba ikwishishi. Ga re re dele ka government re re tswikiri ske ya ba hona. Gobane re tla tseba gore tswikiri ina le mathata a yona fela batho ba e rata. Fela ina le mohola le yona mo mmeleng wa batho. Se re se bolelago ke dino tse di lago le swikiri. Ene a se dino ka moka tse di nago le swikiri, ke dino tse di itšego. Se se golo se re bolela gore re le committee ya finance. Re re sello thata setšhabeng ke taba ya consultation, poledišano, go bontšhana, gore batho le bona ba be le seka se ba se beyang, go be le seo ba beng ba se bolelang, gore molaotheo o ga o tlo ba gona, e be molao o e leng gore le bona ba o tseba gore kwa bona ba o own ba tla ba o hlomphe. Se re se thabelago ke gore go na le process ye ithomilego ye sa le go gona mo e leng gore Department ya Treasury le balekane ka bona ba tsere taba ye ba isitse go network. Mo re tsebang gore network e ile go tlhakantšha batho ka moka ba bana go le kgatlego mo lefatsheng mo molaong o leng gona wa South Africa. Honorable Chairperson, ikosi thabile, ikosi izale ebaleni. Abanobesa sibabona ngemlinga kobe nebhiti. Abasobesa sibabona ngemporiana. Nasikhuluma ngebudget, asikhulumi ngebudget ukuthi sikhuluma ngesikhuwa, sikhuluma la kuma department kuphela. Nekhaya sibhincile nasizokwenza iminyanya le. Lokho kukhulumela ukuthi ibudget into nasebantwini ekhona. Manje njengoba inkosi ithabile, thina siba abantu sithabile, sibhincile. Iveke lena izago, iveke lena iphelako sizabe sinyanya. Amagwabo kuzabe kumnyanya zinyama ngapha nangapha. Manje sithi abantwini bekhethu nasele sinyanya sidla iminyanya sidla amagwabo. Asiqaleni indaba ye-nominate ngoba ngiyo ekhuluma nge-sweetened sugary beverages. Ukuthi izasivelithele ikinga. Asisho ukuthi ukugula lokhu osithi kulethwa zinto ezineshukela ezinselo ezineshukela angeke silethwe ngokhunye kodwa lezi inseli ezinengishukela ziletha ukugula okukhulu iDepartment of Health izile yabambisana nathi akhe ngitsho ngithi ikhona into esiyibonileko umhlolo kaJames ekomitini umhlonishwa la uHonorable Liz wenza umhlolo engasange siubone mara umhlolo esiwuthokozelayo nathi ngiraro ngwekhabo lo nasele agida la waba ngokuthoma nasikhuluma ngebudget wokujamisa isandla uchairperson angakamrecognize wa supporta ibudget wa move for the adoption of the budget kungakho namhlanje sijame la ANC sithokozela ukuthi siyaberekisana siyabona sibonile sikhulile ukuthi sifanele siberekisane nesithokozela uchairperson ayenze ukuthi singaloku sidosana sicabange ukuthi abantu basikhethile basilethela ukuthi sizoberekela bona sicale lokho abakufunayo siyathokoza honorable Leaf honorable Mazambane Zamzam siyathokoza bangakubethi nathi naselusukana angitsho ngithi siyathokoza nokuthi iIFP namhlanje noma nikhuluma lokho nikukhulumileko nokho kuhle ukuthi umuntu akusole mara abe nento ayibekako niya advise niyakha niyakhisa nisimbhidla mnyanya njengabanye angitsho niyababona imbhidla mnyanya niyazibona ziyaziveza sasizijwayela indru ezifana nalezi manje asitsho ke ukuthi ngithokozela okhunye okuchileko or don't play the man, play the ball.
Do it in 1 minute.
Rarapel. Riti. Ukhongolose angithi nasele ngiswaphela mcini sihlalo. Kuthi ukhongolose uzwile ebantwini ukuthi ufunani. Konke sizokwenza sisupporta i-team yethu eze lapha ka Treasury uMinister no Deputy Minister. Ukhongolose unemithetho ibekileko. Sithi ebantwini hayi abangasimalunga nalaba bamalunga nangabe kukhona njengoba siya ku policy conference abafuna ukukutsho ngemthethweni yethu abakhambe baye kuma constituency office wethu abakhambe baye ema officeini weANC batsho niyavuma na asisho ukuthi okhunye ukhongolosa kuchoko ukuthi emberegweni wethu esithe siyawenza nasibereka la nisithume khona nangabe kukhona la sinigadanga amakhonsi la sikhe sakhamba kumbi khona
Thank you.
sithi chebe vumani bo
Thank you very much.
sithi thina nangabe
you, Honourable
kukhona
Member.
lokho ekufanyele nisitshele khona ningasabi sizwile
Thank you, Honourable
ngoAugust
Member.
yakophelileko nisibethile ngeswazi sizwile ene sithi siukhongolose
Thank you.
siyazibophela sithi
Honourable
thina
Mahlangu,
lokho
thank you.
nisitshele khona sikuzwile ene sizokwenza kuhle vumani
Honourable
bo
Mahlangu,
thank you chairperson
thank you very much. The next speaker is the Honourable Alberts. The Honourable Alberts not here. Proceed, Honourable Alberts.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, I used to say to Minister Gordon that we understand that he has an immensely difficult job. Given our junk status, Minister, I can safely say that you have an impossible job. The irony is that the damage that you have to fix is completely self-inflicted by President Zuma. Upon the cabinet reshuffle and your appointment, the President not only released the brakes on the train called South Africa that was already running downhill, but finally dismantled all brakes that this train had. We know that the captured cabinet has already worked out his grand master plan on what it intends to do with taxpayers and state pensioners' money. We also know that you will push headlong into deeper bankruptcy despite the harm inflicted. We know that this cabinet will thus implement the following, amongst others. The nuclear build program will continue. Full-scale fracking in the Karoo will continue. The unaffordable national health insurance will continue. Funding projects for PELS from the GEPF Isabaya Fund will continue. funding bankrupt parastatals like the SAA from the GEPF will be a new feature, but a continuing one. But we have to warn you, Minister, every self-inflicted wound is a wound given to the people of the country. They are waking up and realizing this. Therefore, you will in future see how tax income will dwindle as people spontaneously rise up and revolt by both avoiding and evading tax. For who in their right mind would want to pay a cent to a captured elite that rules only for its own benefit and hides its true motives behind divisive and racist buzzwords like white monopoly capital? Sover dit enige vertroue in u aangaan, minister, is daar verskeie redes vir kommer. Ons weet al reeds dat die minister met 'n gesplete tong praat as hy sê dat hy stabiliteit wil terugbring, want in die agtergrond hoor ons duidelik wat sy marxistiese raadgewer, professor Malikana, se mening is. And then there is the question about the minister's own honesty to Parliament. The minister stated in Parliament that SNP had decided to downgrade the country before he was appointed. But today we can state with certainty that this is not the truth. Here I have in my hand a letter from SNP to us confirming that the date of their decision to downgrade South Africa as the 3rd of April, sometime after the minister's appointment. Therefore, the reshuffle did have a material impact on the decision, and it's a clear signal that the markets are very concerned. And we need to take note of that, Minister. Given these facts, we have every reason to doubt your reassurances about fiscal policy going forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Lees.
Islalo, yazi ngibona ukuthi Honourable Karim akekho. But you know, Honourable Karim and I seldom agree about much, he being a communist and me being a capitalist. But I want to second his congratulations to the outgoing DG for an excellent job done over many years. Now, Minister, I'm really having second thoughts about your ability to do this job. You're obviously a very quick learner, because in your speech you didn't once mention radical economic transformation, and that is a good sign. Honourable Imam, I take my hat off to you. You're a real stayer. You don't give up. Even when you don't get the Deputy Minister's job, you carry on trying. Mr. Chair, state-owned entities are fiscal blood-sucking leeches on our society. It matters not what entity you look at. At best, there's fiscal wastage. At worst, it's simple greed and corruption. Over the last 5 years, SAA has lost a staggering 15.7 billion rand. This is so much money that it's difficult to conceptualize. Otto ngizozama. I-SAA ilahleka imoseka imali enkulu kakhulu. Imali ngangokuthi ungaka ama-clinic awu-628. Noma ikole awu-449. Noma izindlo 830,000. Unganikeza ama-student awu-65,000 i-bursary. Le mali enkulu kangaka kuqhubeka kanjalo. Mr. Chair, this same drain on national fiscus is evident whether one looks at Eskom, Transnet, Petro SA, or just about any other state-owned entity. This high exposure to the debt of loss-making SOEs is frightening. And Minister Gigaba, you are clearly lining up the PIC for a raid on its 1.8 trillion rand GEPF hard-earned pensioners' funds to bail out SAA and other SOEs. It is a sickening thought that the ANC government can even contemplate putting government pensioners at risk. Minister Gigaba, please tell us unequivocally this afternoon whether or not you and your ministry are indeed considering taking the funds of pensions administered by the PIC as a source of funding for the SOEs. Mr. Chair, there are too many SOEs. Some must be liquidated, and yet others, like the SAA, must be privatized. The DA is the only capable party of managing public funds efficiently and effectively. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Chairperson, before I make my input, I wanted to start with Honorable Shibambo, who ran away. I wanted to tell him that in a kleptocratic state, there is no constitution. So the South African government has a constitution that is admired the world over. So it's very rhetorical for anybody to imply that we are a kleptocratic state. Honorable Alberts, monopoly capital does not know any color. So at no point have we said that we'll promote monopoly capital at the expense of the people of South Africa who are poor and black in particular. So let's not confuse things. Honorable David, I'm actually disappointed at your conduct because you decided to bring a matter that's sub judice, that is in front of a court of law, on the appointment of the current minister, whether the president took a right decision or not. So if you claim to respect the law, let's do that even on this matter. But nevertheless, let me concentrate on my speech because I was able to know the type of things that all of you will, your whole lot will raise. Honorable Chairperson, having listened to the presentations made before me, I need to say this up front. In the process of preparing for this budget debate, as I applied my mind, I decided to arm myself with reading a research document commissioned by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation titled Rethinking Non-Racialism, Reflections of a Selection of South African Leaders. And the reasons I consulted this work was to refresh my mind on how to avoid being rhetoric when addressing complex societal issues, because within the diverse tapestry of South African politics, there still lies a challenge of nation building and transformation. At the same time, that research work dealt with how the South African leadership interpreted and valued non-racialism and what each leader as an overarching imperative on building a non-racial society had to say, and how they arrived at individual conclusions. And once again, as we discuss economic transformation, to me the same objectives applies. There will be different interpretation of economic transformation, but please allow me to borrow on the conclusion of the foundation by drawing similar questions. One, we need to answer questions asked every day as to what does economic transformation mean in a South African society today? And secondly, how do we build an unracial society and what are the challenges facing us today? We were cautioned that when looking into these matters, we might be overwhelmed by the challenges. But as we answer these questions, the reality is that Pick and Pay, Maserati, Macro, and One and Only Hotel are not owned by the majority of people who are black. We happen to see that those who live in shanty towns happen to be black. Those are the realities of what we need to deal with on a daily basis. In the same vein, we need to acknowledge that a lot has happened, mainly through interventions of the ANC-led government. Therefore, honorable members, we can choose to either build a polarized society, but I am optimistic and believe that nation building It's a means that we can achieve if we work together. We need to beneficiate black South Africans of the economic commanding heights. And the time is now. Chairperson, lest we are accused with just sloganizing and being just rhetoric, here are the suggestions. 1, we need to measure the achievements of the transformation through government acting as an intermediary and regulatory role that it plays to regulate the markets. That's what government is doing. And to avoid a financial crisis. And deracialization of the financial sector will be achieved when procurement reflects South African demographics. The minister himself said so. Clear targets need to be set by the financial sector itself, and they need to be more ambitious. We need commitment, and the financial sector charter should be reviewed. And that answers Floyd's question. And the wealth targets and the BE codes needs to create more wealth amongst black people. The current BE funding model is not assisting. Therefore, we need to look at indirect ownership, Honorable Minister. We need to grow dividends through shares, something that the DA does not want. Let me tell you what they said on the 14th of March. When we were saying there's a need to have more shareholders at the JSE listed, they said, no, actually, let's concentrate on giving banks more standards and codes. This is the people who said so. They said, no. Don't put more black people on the JSC, rather concentrate on empowering the banks. So they cannot stand here and claim authority on fighting for the poor. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC-led government has put in place mechanisms to transform the financial sector. A charter was adopted and a council put in place. However, we need to speed up the process of the implementation of the codes. As we speak, black shareholding is estimated only at 25%, which is my view that is not adequate. Even worse, women's shareholding has gone down to 7%. There's a perception that because black management has risen to 49%, that is adequate. It can't be. My take is that whilst we appreciate employment, equity, ownership, and control of the economic commanding heights in South Africa, we need not to mince our words and be clear and to bolster the approach that will show inclusive growth, Honorable Minister, and radical economic transformation. All I know is that all black majority 20 years down the line, we don't own the means of production. The Banking Association of South Africa, known as BASA, has made a commitment to inclusive growth. We as government can't achieve transformation without the private sector. As we prepare for the establishment of Cooperatives Bank, I repeat, as we prepare, because we are going to change the situation where the monopoly is the 4 banks. We are, as the ANC-led government, going to establish cooperative banks, and we are going to make sure that licensing is made easier for those women and men in Limpopo to be able to establish their own bank, save in their localities, and be able to make business on their own. We are not going to be apologetic about that. It is also unacceptable that we only have a limited ownership by black people of insurance products, Honorable Minister. The chairperson spoke about it. Only one insurance company actually came to make a presentation. They said that it is very difficult for them to operate in this market. They are being sabotaged on a daily basis. And the chairperson presented the report. And that report will inform the action that the government of the ANC is going to take. In realizing these diminishing returns in the 2 previous fiscal years, the JSE made commitment that it will implement this, except the DA. The JSE says it will do it, the DA says no. Some of the matters I knew will find expression in the gathering was the performance of SAA. I knew we were going to speak about it. And when we come to this one, Chair, I want to pause and say there were 5 pillars that were presented as part of the turnaround strategy by the new board. 5 pillars. And part of those 5 pillars is to maintain liquidity. As we speak, 1 billion rand sits in other countries in assets that belong to South Africa. We're saying, Minister, please unlock that money because immediately when we do so, we'll be liquidity. Secondly, we said they need to optimize their role in revenue maintenance. And they promised us, and we'll hold them to account to what they said. We are trying to give the new board an opportunity to operate. We said to them, in 3 months' time, come and give us a report as to how far you are. None of these benches made a suggestion. None of them. As we continue, let me tell you something. What was their interest? Their interest was on PIC. And I said in any corporate philosophy, when you're doing risk, you know very well, Honorable Mania, is that investment is based on nominal returns. That's a fact. That's the basic principle of making business. As to who becomes the investor, it's got nothing to do with these ventures. That's a fact, Minister. They are interested as to who is the investor because they want to be part of that. And we're saying, Bafemburoto. Bafemburoto aleka bafaburoto batatwela huli. Having said that, we will monitor the performance of SAA to avoid mismanagement of the national carrier. We'll also avoid and await the tabling of the recapitalization plan as promised by the board. We expect this financial year to be different from the previous ones, so should the new board. We urge the department to assist in reprioritization.
Please conclude, Honorable Member.
Modula Stulo, Michelo re bona mona Afrika Borwa fela, mo difofane tse tswang mafatsheng a mang a di kenang ka hara naha di laitshe batho di ba ise ditoropong tse nyane. Ha o no bona mohlolo ona Britannic England kapa kae mo bona mohlolo ona o etsahala. Tena di etsahetse pusong ya bona. Ha ke tšhala monwana moeta modula stulo. Ke kopa ho hlakisa ho batho ba rona hore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hawe ke a leboha.
Thank you. The Honorable Minister Kikaba, conclude the debate.
Thank you, Chairperson. Our topmost job is to grow the economy, to transform ownership, institutions, and structures of that economy, and to manage the finances of our country in a prudent manner. That summarizes the challenge we have. National Treasury, in that regard, stands out as a vital institution amongst our nation's efforts towards capability building and enhancement. We are a nation that has expressed a desire to grow and develop. And part of doing that is to build, requires that we build institutions that will enable us to achieve the development that we need. It is important to continue enhancing its skilled and professional personnel. On the 1st of April, I said about National Treasury, and I wish to quote this in order to correct an honorable member who stood here and deliberately and knowingly misquoted me, despite the fact that my statement is public knowledge and that I quoted it in the standing committee, but I wish to repeat it again for him. For too long, there has been a narrative or perception about Treasury that it belongs primarily and exclusively to orthodox economists, big business, powerful interests, and international investors. With respect, this is a people's government. Treasury, like all the institutions of our democratic state, belongs to the people of South Africa. There was no wishy-washiness about this. Black and white, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, urban and rural. its policies, its management, its communication must be accessible to all South Africans. Like the nation as a whole and government itself, the National Treasury does not exist for the exclusive use and benefit of some with power and vested interests. Having from Sandton and Alexandra, Stellenbosch and Khayelitsha, and everywhere in our beloved country, we need to find each other. Its policies, its management, its communication must be accessible to all South Africans. I hope this puts paid to deliberate disinformation, but I doubt it will. It is my fervent hope that our people sitting at home can today be able clearly to distinguish between those resolute towards building our nation and those hell-bent on destroying it, whose views have been rejected 5 times by the people whenever they have been asked to vote since 1994. 5 times our people have been asked to choose, and 5 times our people have said no to you. We must focus on the urgent task at hand and exercise the leadership required of us. Leadership bears the burden of responsibility to help society respond to the challenges of the time, to help resolve our most urgent problems, and to help realize our most promising opportunities. Whilst most among the critical stakeholders, those most conscientious about their leadership responsibility and our collective vision for a radically improved future, those will come together despite their other differences to build this future we want. These eminent leaders of our people must move forward all the time. And as Winston Churchill once advised, they cannot afford to stop and throw stones at every dog that barks at them. Actually, what would be even more stupid is for them to stop and bark back at every dog barking at them. Our focus is on deflecting any further downgrade and on growing our economy inclusively. We will do that by remaining resolute and not be distracted by gossip and rumor mongering, no matter how vicious and frequently it is repeated. For prominent on our agenda is that ours is a racialized economy still reflecting the patterns of apartheid colonial relations and structures. Our economy is highly carbon intensive based on the extraction and export of raw materials while importing finished goods, and it is deindustrializing. It consists largely of oligopolistic industries with low competition and high barriers to entry. It is highly unequal with huge concentrations of wealth among a tiny portion of the population. It is highly exclusive on the basis of race, gender, and class. Actually, Oxfam estimates that just 3 South African billionaires own wealth equivalent to the bottom half of our population. This means that 3 citizens own more wealth than 28 million other South Africans combined. They further estimate that the richest 1% of our population owns 42% of the wealth, that the top 10% of our population owns 95% of the South African wealth. I wish to make bold to say that this is no basis for an inclusive, stable, united, prosperous, and democratic society. The challenge of this and the reality of it pricks our conscience and is an indictment on all of us as a nation. And the only way you can change this is not by eloquent speeches it is through decisive and bold interventions in the economy where the state plays as importantly a role as the business sector will do, where we act united as business, labor, social partners, and government to address these structural defects in the South African economy. It is the only intervention we can make. Because these problems are structural problems. At the heart of them, they owe their existence from these high levels of concentration, the existence of oligopolies and monopolies, and from a structure of production that continues to depend on the exploitation of raw materials and cannot sustain economic growth, job creation, and our efforts to fight poverty and inequality. To speak these truths and take aim at these social injustices as described above would surely invite the fury and ferocity of those unwilling to accept that radical change must happen in our economy. Radical economic transformation is not phrase-mongering or populist sloganeering that you must throw around whenever you speak. It is fundamentally not about the form, the act of speaking. Whether you say the word radical economic transformation or you doesn't, actually doesn't matter. What matters is what you are saying, the substance of what you are saying. We can change ownership structures and institutions of our economy within the fiscal framework. Actually, radical economic transformation is a means towards inclusive growth. That is why we must grow the economy, grow it inclusively, in order to expand our revenue base and grow our fiscus, to be able to reduce our public debt and increase our social and economic investments. This is our only focus, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Members are reminded that the debate on transport budget vote will take place at 16:15 in the National Assembly chamber. The debate on police, including independent police investigatory, will take place 16:15 in the Old Assembly. And the debate on art and culture budget vote will take place here in 16:15. That is room E249. That concludes, honorable members, the debate and the business of this mini plenary. The plenary now rise.